I walked in expecting a victory lap, holding the door for my mistress in her crimson dress. I introduced her as the future of the company, thinking the humiliation of my peers was the ultimate power move. But when the new owner arrived, she looked through me like an employee whose badge had already stopped working. It was my wife, and in that frozen moment, I realized my entire life had just turned into evidence against me. My name is Madeline Griffin. And if there is one thing I have learned in 15 years of corporate warfare, it is that the most powerful man in the room is the one who makes everyone else wait. The elevator climbed toward the 42nd floor of the Apex Meridian Strategies Tower, the pressure popping comfortably in my ears. Beside me, Talia Monroe checked her reflection in the polished steel doors. She was wearing the crimson dress I had bought her last week, a slash of violent red against the sterile gray of the corporate lift. It was a bold choice for a board meeting, bordering on inappropriate, which was exactly why I told her to wear it. We were not here to blend in. We were here to signal a changing of the guard. I checked my watch. We were exactly 7 minutes late. Perfect. The acquisition had happened overnight. A sudden, violent swallow by a ghost firm listed only as MG Atlas. No one in the C-suite knew who they were. The whispers had started at 6 in the morning. Frantic texts flying between executives who were suddenly terrified for their golden parachutes. They were guessing tech billionaires from Silicon Valley or old oil money from Texas. They were wrong. I knew something they did not. I had been secretly communicating with the transition lawyers for 3 weeks. I had fed them the compliance failures in operations. I had handed them the inflated vendor contracts Reed Halston, our sweating CFO, had been hiding for a year. I was not a victim of this takeover. I was the architect of the survival strategy. I was the inside man. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. I placed a hand on the small of Talia's back, guiding her toward the double-glass doors of the boardroom. "Remember," I murmured, leaning close to her ear, "you are not just an assistant today. You are the future vice president of client relations. Walk like it." Talia flashed a smile that was equal parts hunger and nerves. She was young, sharp, and entirely dependent on my narrative. That was how I liked them. We entered the boardroom. The atmosphere inside was thick enough to choke a man. The entire executive team was gathered around the massive oval table, their postures rigid, their eyes darting toward the empty chair at the head of the table. The air conditioning was humming too loudly, filling the silence of a room where careers were about to die. When I walked in, heads snapped up. I saw the flash of irritation on Reed Halston's face. I saw the anxiety radiating off Lena Barrick, the head of operations. They looked like cattle sensing the slaughterhouse. I felt like the butcher. "Morning, everyone," I said, my voice booming slightly, cutting through the tension. I pulled out a chair for Talia, placing her right next to me, effectively displacing the director of HR. "Apologies for the delay. I was handling a crisis with the Silvercrest account. You know how it is. Revenue never sleeps." I sat down, unbuttoning my tailored jacket and leaning back, spreading my arms across the adjacent empty chairs. "King energy." "Caleb," Reed hissed, leaning across the table. His tie was crooked. "Do you know anything? The legal team is already in the holding room. Who is behind MG Atlas? Is it private equity?" I smirked, checking the cuffs of my shirt. "Relax. Reed, change is good. Besides, if your books are clean, you have nothing to worry about, right?" Reed flinched. I knew his books were about as clean as a mudslide. That was the leverage I intended to use when I shook hands with the new owner. I would offer them continuity. I would offer them loyalty. I would offer them the heads of everyone else at this table. "And who is this?" Lena asked, glaring at Talia. "This is a closed session for senior leadership. Caleb." "Talia is my top protege," I said smoothly, not even looking at Lena. "She manages the day-to-day on our 3 biggest portfolios. If we are discussing the future of this company, she needs to be in the room. She is the future." Talia opened her notebook, looking bored and beautiful. Exactly as we had rehearsed, the red dress screamed for attention, a beacon of vitality in a room full of gray suits and gray skin. I could feel their judgment, but I interpreted it as envy. They were wondering how I got away with it. They were wondering if I knew the new boss personally. I let them wonder. The clock on the wall ticked past 9:15 in the morning. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the far end of the room swung open. The room went dead silent. 2 men in charcoal suits entered first. Lawyers. I recognized the breed immediately. High-end, billing $1,000 an hour. Faces blank as stone, they moved to the side, standing like sentries. Next came security. A single man with an earpiece, scanning the room with professional disinterest. Then, we heard it. The sound was distinct against the plush carpet of the hallway, growing louder on the tile of the entryway. Click, 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 the rhythmic, measured strike of heels. Not hurried, not hesitant. It was the walk of someone who owned the building, the ground beneath it, and the oxygen we were all currently breathing. I straightened my tie, flashing a reassuring wink at Talia. This was it, my audition. A woman stepped through the doors. She was wearing a navy suit, tailored to absolute perfection, sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair was cut in a severe, chic bob that framed a face devoid of emotion. She carried no briefcase, no purse, no files. She carried only herself. I prepared my winning smile, the one that had closed $50 million in sales last year. I prepared to stand up and offer my hand. Then she turned, and the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows hit her face. My smile did not just fade. It froze, calcifying instantly into a mask of pure confusion. My brain stuttered, the synapses misfiring as they tried to reconcile the context with the visual data. It was Madeline, my wife. But it wasn't Madeline. This wasn't the woman I had left 2 hours ago in our condo. The one wearing a fuzzy sweater and worrying about a discrepancy in the grocery budget. This woman stood 3 inches taller. Her posture was steel. Her eyes were not the warm, soft brown I had ignored for 10 years. They were dark, flat, and terrifyingly intelligent. She walked to the head of the table. She did not look at the room. She did not look at the view. She placed a single, slim laptop on the mahogany surface and opened it. The silence in the room was absolute. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, a roaring sound like a waterfall. MG Atlas. The realization hit me like a physical blow to the chest. MG, Madeline Griffin, her maiden name. It had been right in front of me. The transition emails, the ghost buyer, the sudden liquidity. It was her family money, the philanthropic trust I had mocked her for managing. She had not been donating it. She had been weaponizing it. I stood up, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. My chair scraped loudly against the floor, a jagged noise that made everyone flinch except her. "Madeline?" I whispered. It came out as a choke. She stopped typing. She did not look up immediately. She finished a sentence, hit enter, and then, slowly, raised her eyes. She looked at me, but there was no recognition. There was no "hello, Caleb." There was no "we need to talk." She looked at me the way a surgeon looks at a tumor before the first cut. She looked through me, past me, as if I were a line item on a spreadsheet that had already been redlined for deletion. She glanced at the wedding ring on her finger, then at the ring on mine, and finally, her gaze slid to Talia in the red dress. Talia shrank back, suddenly looking very small and very cheap. Madeline's face remained perfectly smooth. She turned to the lawyer on her right and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Please be seated," Madeline said. Her voice was calm, low, and terrifying. It was not the voice of my wife. It was the voice of the CEO. "My name is Madeline Griffin. I am the sole proprietor of MG Atlas and the new chairwoman of Apex Meridian. We have a great deal of work to do before lunch." She looked back at me, her eyes dead and cold. "Sit down, Mr. Ward," she said. I sat. The king energy was gone. In its place was the cold, creeping realization that I had not walked into a victory lap. I had walked into a trap, And the woman holding the lever was the one person I thought I had fooled completely. 6 hours before I walked into that boardroom and watched my life disintegrate. I woke up in the master bedroom of our condo on the 32nd floor. The morning sun was hitting the glass, turning the Denver skyline into a painting of gold and steel. I remember stretching my arms out, feeling the resistance of the Egyptian cotton sheets, and thinking that life was finally aligning exactly the way I deserved. I lay there for a moment, listening to the silence of the apartment. It was the kind of expensive silence you only get when you are high enough above the street noise to pretend the rest of the world does not exist. In my head, I was already spending the money. The acquisition rumors had been swirling for a week, and I had done the math. If the new owners wanted to keep the vice president of enterprise sales happy, they would need to offer a retention bonus. I was thinking $200,000. Minimum, maybe $250,000. Enough to upgrade the lease on the Porsche to the new 911 Turbo, or perhaps put a down payment on that ski cabin in Aspen I had been eyeing, a place where I could take Talia on weekends without looking over my shoulder. I rolled out of bed, feeling the cold hardwood under my feet. I felt invincible. I felt like a man who had successfully juggled fire for 3 years and was about to take a bow. I walked out to the kitchen, the smell of expensive coffee already in the air. The open-plan living area was vast, decorated in shades of cream and charcoal. Madeline's taste, it was elegant, cold, and immaculate. Madeline was sitting at the marble kitchen island. She looked ordinary, painfully ordinary. That was the word I always used to describe my wife to Talia. Ordinary. She was wearing an oversized, oatmeal-colored knitted sweater that swallowed her frame, and her dark hair was pulled back in a messy, loose bun that looked like she hadn't brushed it in 2 days. She wasn't wearing makeup. She looked tired, harmless, and soft. She was hunched over a stack of papers, a pair of reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "Morning," I said, breezing past her to the espresso machine. I didn't kiss her. We had stopped doing that in the mornings years ago. "You're up early." Madeline didn't look up immediately. She traced a line on the paper with her finger, her brow furrowed in that focused, slightly confused way she got when she was dealing with numbers. "I couldn't sleep," she said. Her voice was quiet, raspy with sleep. "I was looking over the quarterly statements for the Griffin Family Trust, the philanthropic initiative." I pressed the button for a double shot, the machine whirring loudly. I suppressed a sigh. Madeline's work was a constant source of mild irritation for me. She managed her family's charitable giving, a scholarship fund here, an arts grant there. I always framed it to my colleagues as her cute little project, a hobby to keep her busy so she didn't ask too many questions about why I was working late 4 nights a week. "Everything okay?" I asked, feigning interest as I grabbed a ceramic cup. "I don't know," she said. She finally looked up. Her eyes were clear, but there was a strange stillness in them. "There are some small discrepancies. I was looking at the liquidity transfers from last month. There is a movement of $75,000 to a vendor called Silvercrest Consortium. I don't recognize the name. Caleb, did you move anything recently? Maybe for an investment I forgot about?" My hand froze on the handle of the coffee mug. Silvercrest. That was the shell company I had set up 6 months ago to siphon off consulting fees from our larger accounts. It was the account that paid for the apartment in Lodo where Talia lived. It was the account that paid for the diamond tennis bracelet currently sitting in Talia's jewelry box. My heart hammered once, hard, against my ribs, but I didn't flinch. I had practiced this. I turned around, leaning casually against the counter, blowing on my coffee. I put on my best condescending smile, the one that said, "I am the expert, and you are the amateur." "Silvercrest?" I chuckled, shaking my head. "Babe, you are reading the ledger wrong. That is probably just an administrative reallocation, or maybe a vendor fee for the legal team handling the trust assets. You know how complicated those tax structures get." I took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim. "I told you. You shouldn't be stressing yourself out with the granular details. That is why we pay the accountants. Let the professionals handle it. Maddie, you just focus on the giving part. It was a dismissal, a pat on the head. I was treating her like a child trying to fly an airplane. Madeline looked at me. She didn't blink. For a second, just a fraction of a second. I thought I saw something sharp flash behind her eyes, something dangerous, but then she looked down at the paper again, shrinking back into her sweater. "You're right," she whispered. "I'm probably just reading it wrong. I'm not good with the complex stuff." "Exactly," I said. I set my cup down and checked my watch. "Look, I have to run. Big day today. The new owners are coming in. I need to make sure the team is ready." I walked over to where she sat. I leaned down and pressed a quick, dry kiss to her forehead. I didn't look at her face. If I had, I might have seen that she wasn't reading the paper anymore. She was staring at the marble counter with a terrifying intensity. "Wish me luck," I said. "Good luck, Caleb," she said. Her voice was flat. I grabbed my jacket and headed for the door. As I walked down the hallway, I pulled out my phone. I didn't look back at my wife. I opened my messages and found the thread with Talia. Game time. I typed, "Wear the bold red dress. The tight one. First impressions are currency. Let's show them who runs this place." I hit send and slipped the phone back into my pocket, feeling the thrill of the double life, the rush of getting away with it. I opened the front door and stepped out into the hallway. The heavy lock clicking shut behind me. I walked to the elevator, whistling a low tune. I did not know it then, but that click of the door was the loudest sound in the world, and I did not see what happened inside the apartment the moment I left. I learned about it months later, reading the transcripts of the deposition. The moment the door closed, the ordinary woman vanished. Madeline stopped slouching. She took off the reading glasses and set them on the counter. She didn't look confused. She didn't look tired. She looked at the door where I had just exited, and her expression settled into a cold, absolute resolve. It was the look of a person who had just confirmed a diagnosis and was now preparing for surgery. She picked up her phone. She didn't call the accountant. She didn't call her mother. She dialed a number saved as G. Pierce, Gregory Pierce, the most ruthless corporate litigator in the state, a man whose retainer cost more than my annual salary. She brought the phone to her ear, her eyes fixed on the empty space I had left behind. "Proceed," she said, her voice steady and stripped of all warmth. He lied. Today is the day. The drive from my family home in the Highlands to the lower downtown district took exactly 22 minutes in the Porsche. I drove with the windows down, letting the cold rush of air wake me up completely. I needed to be sharp. I turned up the volume on the stereo, letting the bass thump against my chest. This was the rhythm of a man on the ascent. I pulled up to the curb outside the brick and glass loft building where Talia lived. It was a prime location, right near the stadium. The kind of place that screamed new money and young energy. I paid the lease through Silvercrest. Of course, it was an investment in my quality of life. A line item under client retention in my mental ledger. Talia was waiting for me in the lobby. Through the glass, I saw her pacing. When she saw the car, she pushed through the doors and walked toward me. The sight of her hit me like a shot of adrenaline. She was wearing the crimson dress I had requested, tight enough to be illegal in a standard corporate handbook, but expensive enough to be called fashion-forward. She looked dangerous. She looked like a weapon I was about to unsheathe. She slid into the passenger seat, bringing the scent of jasmine and ambition with her. "You are late," she said, buckling her seatbelt. Her hands were shaking slightly. "I am on executive time," I replied, merging back into traffic with a smooth acceleration. "And so are you. Remember the narrative. Talia, who are you today?" She took a breath, rehearsing the lines we had gone over during our last weekend trip to Vail. "I am Talia Monroe, Senior Account Liaison. I manage the day-to-day operations of the Silvercrest and Apex Global portfolios. I am here to provide continuity of data for the new leadership." "Good," I said, glancing at her profile. "But say it with less vibrato. You are not asking for permission to be in the room. You are the reason the room makes money. You are my top protege. You are the fresh face of the future, standing next to the tired, gray faces of the past. That is the dynamic, old versus new, dead weight versus rocket fuel. I reached over and placed a hand on her knee, squeezing firmly. You are the upgrade, Talia, in every sense. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Talia was 26 years old, but she had the survival instincts of a street cat. That was why I liked her. She wasn't just decorative, she was hungry. Caleb, she asked, looking out the window at the passing skyscrapers. Do we know for sure who MG Atlas is yet? The rumors online are wild. Some people are saying it is a hostile takeover by a foreign conglomerate. Others think it is a liquidation firm. Let them guess, I laughed, tapping the steering wheel. It doesn't matter who they are. What matters is what they need. And they need me. I made Apex Meridian valuable. Without my enterprise sales division, this company is just a collection of mid-level managers and overpriced office furniture. The new owner, whoever he is going to look at the balance sheet and see one name keeping the lights on. Madeline Griffin. So what happens to us? She asked. To me? I become president, I said, the words tasting sweet in my mouth. Or maybe chief operating officer. Reed Halston is out. He is a dinosaur. Lena Barrick is too emotional. Once I am running operations, I legitimize your role. We move you from liaison to director. We sanitize the paper trail. We stop hiding. Talia turned to me, her eyes narrowing. You sound very confident for someone who hasn't met the buyer. Confidence is just preparation in a suit, I said. I lowered my voice, letting her in on the real secret. I haven't been sitting idle, Talia. For the last 3 weeks, I have been feeding insights to the Transition Council representing MG Atlas. Her eyebrows shot up. You've been talking to them? I have been helping them, I corrected. I sent them the files on Reed's vendor conflicts. I flagged the inefficiencies in Lena's department. I positioned myself as the only honest man in a den of thieves. I handed them the knife. Talia, today, I just watched them use it. Loyalty is a lever. You pull it when it lifts you up, and you let go when it weighs you down. We arrived at the Apex Tower. I didn't valet. I parked in my reserved spot, right next to the elevator bank. Ready? I asked. Talia checked her lipstick in the mirror one last time. Ready? We walked through the lobby. I made a point of not swiping my badge. I nodded at the security guard, Frank, who scrambled to buzz us through the turnstiles. Good morning, Mr. Ward, Frank stammered. Frank, I acknowledged, not breaking stride. We rode the elevator in silence, watching the floor numbers climb. 30, 35, 40. The anticipation was electric. I felt like a gladiator walking into the arena, but I already knew the lions were drugged. Back in that boardroom, the silence that followed her command to sit was not the respectful quiet of a library. It was the suffocating vacuum of an airlock cycling open. I sank into my chair, my limbs feeling heavy and disconnected, as if the gravity in the room had suddenly tripled. Madeline moved with a terrifying economy of motion. She pulled the high-backed leather chair at the head of the table out, the chair that had belonged to the former CEO, a man who had terrified us all, and sat in it as if she had been born there. She did not ask if everyone was ready. She did not ask for water. She simply opened her slim silver laptop, the screen glowing against her face, casting sharp shadows across her cheekbones. The lead attorney, a man with a face like a clenched fist, stepped forward. He did not look at us. He looked at a document in his hands. For the official record, he announced, his voice dry and percussive, I am introducing the sole proprietor of MG Atlas and the newly appointed chairwoman and chief executive officer of Apex Meridian Strategies, Madeline Griffin. Madeline Griffin, the name hung in the air, vibrating with a power I had never attributed to it. In our 10 years of marriage, she had always been Madeline Ward. She had taken my name, or so I thought, but there it was, Griffin, the name of her grandfather, the industrialist, the name on the philanthropic trust I had mocked this very morning. MG Atlas. The realization clawed at my throat. It had been staring me in the face for weeks. M.G. Madeline Griffin. I had spent hours speculating with Talia about who the buyer was. Was it a Saudi prince? A Silicon Valley dropout? A hedge fund shark? No. It was the woman who slept on the left side of my bed. The woman whose cute little project I had dismissed as a hobby. I had looked at the acronym 100 times and seen nothing but my own blind arrogance. Madeline didn't look at me. She didn't look at the wedding ring on my finger or the sweat beginning to bead on my forehead. She looked at the screen, typed a short command, and the massive monitor on the far wall flickered to life. "This is not a transition meeting," Madeline said. Her voice was unrecognizable. It wasn't loud, but it carried a resonance that made the water in the glass pitchers tremble. "This is a restructuring, effective immediately." She pressed a key. A slide appeared. It wasn't a vision statement or a corporate cheerleading graphic. It was a forensic audit summary. The header read, "Systemic inefficiencies and governance failures. I have spent the last 6 months reviewing the operational health of this company," she began, her tone clinical, detached. "What I found was not a business. It was a mechanism for extraction. We have 18% inflation in vendor reporting. We have operational redundancies in 3 distinct sectors, and we have a culture of corruption that ends today." I leaned back slightly, my heart rate steadying just a fraction. Okay, I thought, this is the play. She is cleaning house. She is using the dirt I gave the transition lawyers. I am the source of this intel. I am her partner in this. Even if she can't say it publicly yet. She has to play the tough CEO role, but I am the one who handed her the gun. She clicked to the next slide. A photograph appeared on the screen. It was a headshot of Reed Halston, our CFO. Reed stiffened, his face draining of color. "Mr. Halston," Madeline said, not even turning to look at him. "Your contract explicitly forbids undisclosed financial conflicts. Yet, my audit team found that the consulting firm we use for our tax liability audits is registered to your brother-in-law's residential address in Boulder." Documents flashed on the screen. Invoices, registry filings, emails. It was brutal. It was undeniable. "This relationship has cost the company $400,000 in padded fees over the last fiscal year," Madeline stated. "Security is waiting to escort you to your vehicle. You are terminated for cause." Reed opened his mouth to speak, to protest, but the look Madeline gave him, a flat, dead-eyed stare, sealed his throat shut. He stood up, shaking, and walked out the door like a dead man walking. I watched him go, fighting the urge to smile, one down. "Next," Madeline said. The screen changed. It was Lena Barrick, head of operations. "Ms. Barrick," Madeline continued, the tempo of her voice never wavering. "You approved a logistics contract on March 15th with a shipping entity that has no fleet, no warehouse, and no employees. It does, however, have a bank account co-owned by your nephew." Lena gasped. That is a misunderstanding. That was a provisional vendor." "It was theft," Madeline interrupted. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. "The contract is voided. Your access is revoked. Please leave." Lena grabbed her purse, her eyes wide with shock, and practically ran from the room. The boardroom was frozen. This wasn't a meeting. It was a public execution. It was a documented dismantling of the old guard, surgical and bloodless. I felt a surge of confidence return. I had hated Reed. I had despised Lena. Madeline was doing exactly what I wanted. She was clearing the deck so I could ascend. I was the one who had hinted about Lena's nephew to the lawyers. I was the architect of this purge. I decided it was time to signal my alliance. Time to show the room that I was on the right side of history. I leaned forward, putting on my best, concerned executive face, adjusting my cufflinks. "This is exactly what I've been concerned about for months," I said, my voice smooth, projecting leadership. I turned to the remaining terrified executives. I think we all owe the new CEO a debt of gratitude for finally cutting out the rot. It's hard, but it's necessary if we want to. Mr. Ward. Madeline's voice cut through mine like a guillotine blade. It wasn't a question. It was a stop command. I froze, my mouth half open. She turned her head slowly, finally acknowledging my presence in the room, but there was no warmth in it. There was no husband and wife connection. Her eyes were hard, dark flint. "You will speak when asked," she said. The sentence hung in the air, vibrating with humiliation. It wasn't a request for order. It was a reordering of the universe. She hadn't called me Caleb. She hadn't called me darling. She had spoken to me like a junior intern who had spoken out of turn. I felt the blood rush to my face, a hot, prickling wave of shame. Beside me, I felt Talia flinch. Madeline held my gaze for 3 seconds, long enough for everyone in the room to see my emasculation. And then, slowly, her eyes drifted to the right. She looked at Talia. It was the first time she had acknowledged the girl in the crimson dress. Madeline didn't sneer. She didn't roll her eyes. She simply looked. She took in the tight red fabric, the terrified expression, the bold lipstick that now looked like clown paint in the stark light of the boardroom. Madeline looked at her with a calm, profound indifference, as if Talia were a piece of gaudy office furniture that had been ordered by mistake. In that one quiet glance, Talia dissolved. The predator energy I had coached her on evaporated. She looked suddenly young, cheap, and incredibly foolish. The red dress wasn't a power move anymore. It was a costume. Madeline turned back to the screen, dismissing Talia from existence without saying a word. "We have addressed the incompetence in operations and finance," Madeline said, her fingers hovering over the laptop keys. "Now, let us discuss enterprise sales." She paused, and the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees in temperature. "The division that allegedly makes us untouchable," she added. She hit the enter key. I stared at the screen, waiting for my sales charts, my record-breaking numbers, the proof of my value. I waited for the slide that would save me, but the graph that appeared was not one I had ever created. And the numbers on it were not going up. The image on the screen changed, and for a fleeting second, I felt a ghost of relief. Projected in high definition was the sleek, silver and blue logo of the Silvercrest Consortium. This was my shield. This was my masterpiece, in a quarter where the market was bleeding. Silvercrest was the tourniquet. They were our largest single revenue source, a mysterious consulting group that billed heavy and paid on time. Every time. Silvercrest Consortium, Madeline read from the screen. Her voice was devoid of inflection, like a jagged line going flat on a heart monitor. According to the sales data provided by Mr. Ward, this account represents 18% of our total quarterly revenue. It is the single reason the enterprise sales division posted a profit last year. I sat up straighter, adjusting my tie. This was my ground. I could defend this. "That is correct," I said, projecting my voice to the back of the room. "Silvercrest is a high-volume strategic partner. I landed them myself. They value privacy, which is why their contact chain is exclusive to me. But their money is very real. You can check the bank statements." "We did," Madeline said. "And you are right, Caleb, the money is real." She pressed a key. The sleek logo vanished. In its place appeared a grainy, low-resolution photograph of a dusty strip mall in Henderson, Nevada. A red circle highlighted a single, rusted metal box at a pack-and-ship storefront. "This is the global headquarters of Silvercrest Consortium," Madeline said. "It is a rental mailbox, box number 402. It costs $19 a month." The room went deadly silent. I felt a cold bead of sweat slide down my spine, tracing the line of my vertebrae like a dull knife. My jaw clenched so hard, I thought a molar might crack. This was not supposed to be possible. I had buried the registration deep. I had used a registered agent. "But a mailbox cannot sign checks," Madeline continued, her eyes fixed on the screen. "So we traced the wire transfers. Every single payment from Silvercrest to Apex Meridian originated from a single source. Another slide, a bank routing map, complex arrows pointing from one account to another, but the origin point was highlighted in bright, damning yellow, the Griffin Family Philanthropic Trust. "You were paying us with my money," Madeline said. She finally looked at me. It wasn't a look of anger. It was a look of absolute clinical fascination, like she was studying a bacteria culture. "You used your spousal access privileges to the charitable trust to siphon funds into a shell company, which then paid Apex for services that were never rendered. You inflated your sales numbers to trigger your own performance bonuses. You took money from a fund designed to build libraries for underprivileged children and used it to buy yourself a reputation as a rainmaker." My hands were shaking under the table. I clamped them between my knees. It wasn't just a rumor anymore. It wasn't a suspicion. It was a map. She had the routing numbers. She had the dates. She had the IP addresses. That is a misinterpretation of the asset allocation," I stammered, my voice sounding thin and reedy. "The trust invests in high-growth vehicles. Silvercrest was a vehicle. Silvercrest was a piggy bank," Madeline cut in. "Let us see what else you bought with it." She didn't give me time to breathe. The screen flashed again. This time, it was a series of invoices. They were blown up large enough for everyone to read the fine print. "Invoice number 772, Madeline cited. "Client Summit in the Maldives, $22,000, approved by Madeline Griffin. Attendee list, Madeline Griffin and Talia Monroe." I heard a sharp intake of breath from the woman sitting next to me. "Invoice number 809, Madeline continued, relentless. "Client appreciation gift, diamond tennis bracelet, 3 carats, value, $8,500. Madeline's eyes flicked to Talia's wrist. The bracelet was there, glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. Talia instinctively covered it with her other hand, her face turning a sick shade of gray. "And finally," Madeline said, "we have the payroll authorization for a Ms. Talia Monroe." The document on the screen showed Talia's employment contract. Position: Senior Liaison. Salary: $140,000. Duties: undefined. Hiring Manager: Madeline Griffin. Madeline paused. "You are not an employee, Ms. Monroe. You are a line item. You are a mechanism for embezzlement. He didn't hire you because you were talented. He hired you because he needed a way to launder the money he was stealing from me back into his own pocket." Talia turned to look at me. The admiration, the hunger, the "we are a team" look. It was all gone. In its place was the horrified realization of a woman who thought she was climbing a ladder, only to discover she was digging a grave. She realized she wasn't being elevated. She was being implicated. "You told me it was a real job," Talia whispered, her voice trembling. "You told me I earned it." I couldn't look at her. I kept my eyes on Madeline. "This is personal," I snapped, trying to regain some footing. I slammed my hand on the table. "You are twisting standard business practices because you are angry about the affair. You are trying to humiliate me because I hurt your feelings. This is a divorce dispute, Madeline, not a board matter." Madeline closed the laptop. The screen went dark, but the afterimage of the invoices seemed to burn in the air. "No," she said softly. "Personal is messy. Personal is throwing your clothes off the balcony or keying your car. I have no interest in personal." She stood up, leaning her hands on the table. "This is documented. This is forensic. You didn't just cheat on a marriage. Caleb, you defrauded a corporation. You embezzled charitable funds. You falsified revenue reports to manipulate stock valuation. Those are federal crimes. The affair is irrelevant. The theft is the insult. You treated my family's legacy like your personal ATM." She turned to the head of HR, a terrified man named David who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the carpet. "David," Madeline said, "the Director of Compliance and the VP of Auditing signed off on these Silvercrest accounts. They either knew and were complicit, or they were too incompetent to catch a shell company a first-year associate would have flagged. Fire them, immediately, escort them out now." "Yes," Ms. Griffin, David squeaked. The rest of you. Madeline addressed the remaining survivors at the table. You are on probation. We are implementing a new operating structure effective today. Every contract, every expense, every hire goes through my office until I say otherwise. If you don't like it, the door is open. If you stay, you work for me. The room was silent. No one moved. No one resigned. They were too scared to leave and too scared to stay. Then, all eyes turned to me. I braced myself. I knew what was coming. She had stripped me naked in front of my peers. She had exposed the fraud. She had turned my mistress against me. Now came the termination. I prepared to stand up, to storm out, to call my lawyer and fight this in court. I waited for the words. You're fired. Madeline looked at me. A small, cold smile touched her lips. It was the most terrifying thing she had done all morning. You are waiting for me to fire you, she said. I didn't answer. It would be the easy way out, she mused. You would leave the building. You would call a recruiter. You would spin a story about creative differences and try to land a job at a competitor before the indictment hit. You would run. She sat back down, smoothing her skirt. I am not going to let you run. Caleb. She picked up a pen and tapped it rhythmically against the table. You are not fired, she said. Not yet. The transition from executive royalty to corporate prisoner did not happen with a bang, but with the quiet, humiliating click of a keycard denial. 10 minutes after the board meeting adjourned, I walked to the elevator, intending to return to my corner office on the 42nd floor. I swiped my badge. The light flashed red. I swiped it again. Red. A security guard I didn't recognize stepped forward. Mr. Ward, your clearance has been updated. Your office is now located on the 4th floor. The 4th floor? I scoffed. That is records and compliance. There must be a mistake. No mistake, sir, the guard said, handing me a cardboard box. Your personal effects from the executive suite have already been packed. Your new workstation is ready. My new workstation was a cruel joke. It was a cubicle in the back corner of a windowless room that smelled of ozone and stale coffee. The lighting was harsh fluorescent, buzzing with a low-frequency hum that drilled into my skull. There was no view of the Rockies. There was no assistant to fetch me espresso. There was just a gray desk, a basic computer, and a stack of banker's boxes that reached my waist. On the desk sat a memo, signed by Madeline Griffin. Title: Special Projects Manager. Objective: Forensic Reconciliation of Enterprise Accounts, 2023 to present. Deliverable: You will personally reconstruct the audit trail for every transaction flagged as irregular. You will identify the original source of funds, the beneficiary, and the authorization chain for all Silvercrest and associated shell entity payments. I stared at the paper. She wasn't just demoting me. She was forcing me to investigate myself. She was making me build the gallows, tie the knot, and stand on the trapdoor. I tried to leave the building at lunch to clear my head. I walked to the parking garage, my hand instinctively reaching for the keys to the company Porsche. They were gone. I remembered leaving them on the boardroom table. I walked to the reserved spot where I had parked that morning. The Porsche was gone. In its place was an empty concrete slab. I went to the gate. My badge didn't work. The gate arms stayed stubbornly down. Problem. Mr. Ward? The garage attendant asked. He looked at a screen. Says here your executive transport privileges have been revoked. Company policy for employees below director level. You'll need to park in the public lot across the street. $20 a day. I took a cab home, boiling with rage. I would pack a bag. I would go to a hotel. I would lawyer up. But when I got to the condo, the concierge stopped me in the lobby. I am sorry, Mr. Ward, he said, looking genuinely uncomfortable. I cannot let you up. What do you mean you can't let me up? I live here. The leaseholder, a Griffin family holding entity, updated the resident list an hour ago. You have been removed. The locks have been changed digitally. This is illegal, I shouted, causing a woman walking her poodle to stare. This is an illegal eviction. I am just following instructions, sir. I have a bag here for you. He reached behind the desk and handed me a duffel bag. It contained 3 suits, a week's worth of underwear, and my shaving kit. You have been asked to vacate the premises immediately. If you refuse, I have to call the police. I stood on the sidewalk, holding a gym bag, wearing a $5,000 suit that suddenly felt like a costume. I pulled out my phone to call Madeline. My thumb hovered over her name. I dialed. "This is Madeline's office." A crisp voice answered. It wasn't her. It was her new executive assistant. "Put her on," I snarled. "Ms. Griffin is in a strategy session. She asked me to relay a message if you called. She said, 'Read the memo. Get to work.'" "Tell her I want to see my kids," I yelled into the phone. "Tell her she can't keep my children from me." "What about the kids? Madeline? Are they part of your restructuring too?" The assistant's voice didn't waver. "Ms. Griffin anticipated you would ask that. The children are staying at her mother's estate in Aspen. They are safe. They are enrolled in school there. And they are surrounded by security. Ms. Griffin said to tell you they are not bargaining chips, and she will not allow you to use them as leverage. You will see them when a family court judge says you can see them, not a minute sooner." The line went dead. I checked into a budget motel near the office. My credit cards had all been declined. Corporate and personal, likely frozen by the bank pending the fraud investigation Madeline had undoubtedly triggered. I had $300 in cash in my wallet. That was it. The next morning, the real torture began. At 9 o'clock sharp, my desk phone rang. "Mr. Ward," the assistant said. "Miss Griffin requires your daily progress report. Please bring the files for the Silvercrest Q3 audit to the executive floor." "I can email them," I muttered. "Hard copies only, in person." So I walked. I took the service elevator. My badge didn't work for the main lifts anymore, and carried the heavy stack of folders up 38 flights. I walked past the glass-walled conference rooms where I used to preside like a king. I saw new hires, young, sharp, serious people, working on dual monitors. The office felt different. The frantic, terrified energy of the Reed-Halston era was gone. In its place was a quiet, humming competence. People were working. Systems were running. I reached the executive suite. Madeline's door was open. She was sitting at her desk, reviewing a blueprint. She didn't look up when I entered. "The Q3 files," I said, dropping them on the corner of her desk. "Thank you," she said, still not looking at me. "Did you find the authorization signature for the September wire transfer?" "You know I did," I said through gritted teeth. "It was mine." "And the beneficiary account?" "It was the shell company." "Good," she said. "Make sure that is clearly noted in your summary. I want the trail to be airtight." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "Just fire me. Call the cops. Why this theater?" She finally looked up. Her face was calm, terrifyingly so. "This isn't theater. Caleb, this is risk management. You are a liability. If I fire you now, you run. You hide assets. You spin stories. I am containing you. I am keeping you exactly where I can see you." "It's cruelty," I spat. "It is an elegant prison," she corrected. "And you built it yourself. Every document you organize, every fraud you uncover, every signature you verify, you are building the case against yourself. You have a choice. You can walk out that door right now. You can quit. But if you do, I hand what we have so far to the FBI this afternoon." She leaned back. "Or you can stay. You can finish the project. You can help me clean up the mess you made. And maybe, just maybe, when the indictment comes, the judge will see that you cooperated, that you showed remorse." "You want me to confess on paper," I realized. "I want the truth," she said, "and I want you to be the one to write it down." She turned back to her blueprint. "You are dismissed. The parking garage fee is $20. Do not forget to pay it." I walked back to the service elevator, defeated. As the weeks went on, the company transformed around me. The stock price, which had been wobbling for a year, stabilized and began to climb. The ghost acquisition was hailed in the financial press as a masterstroke. Madeline was on the cover of Forbes, the quiet fixer. From my cubicle in the basement, I watched her interview on a muted TV screen in the break room. She looked radiant. She looked powerful. She looked nothing like the wife I had cheated on. I looked at the spreadsheet in front of me. Line 402. Payment to T. Monroe for consulting services, $12,500. I typed in the notes column. Fraudulent, no services rendered, funds misappropriated by C. Ward. I hit save. Another brick in the wall of my cell. Another day in the elegant prison. It had been exactly 14 days since my demotion. 2 weeks of counting the acoustic tiles in the ceiling of the 4th floor compliance dungeon. My world had shrunk to a 6x6 cubicle, a stack of condemning spreadsheets, and the relentless hum of the ventilation system. I was a ghost in the machine I used to drive. On the 15th morning, the silence of my exile was broken by the squeak of a chair being dragged across the linoleum. I didn't look up immediately. I was too busy cross-referencing a fraudulent travel expense from last October, a trip to Napa Valley that I had billed as a strategic vendor summit. The new hire was probably some fresh-faced intern sent down here to do the filing I was too slow to finish. "Excuse me," a voice said. "Is this terminal active?" My hand froze over the keyboard. I knew that voice, but it sounded wrong, thin, hollow, stripped of the breathless, flirtatious cadence I was used to. I turned my chair slowly, standing there, holding a cardboard box containing a single succulent and a stapler. Was Talia Monroe? For a moment, I didn't recognize her. The Talia I knew was a creature of high-gloss surfaces, blow-dried hair, designer heels, that crimson dress that hugged her like a second skin. This woman was wearing a shapeless gray cardigan over a generic white blouse. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, functional ponytail. Her face was scrubbed clean of makeup, revealing dark circles under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights and panicked tears. She looked small. She looked ordinary. She looked like she was trying to disappear while standing right in front of me. "Talia?" I whispered. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. "Why are you here?" She didn't look at me. She set her box down on the desk next to mine, the empty desk I had been using to stack my files. She sat down, her posture rigid. "I work here," she said flatly. "Data entry clerk, grade 1. "But she fired you," I stammered, looking around to see if anyone was watching us. The office was empty save for a few archivists rows away. "Madeline fired everyone involved. Reed is gone. Lena is gone. Why are you here?" Talia finally turned her head. Her eyes were red-rimmed. "She offered me a deal. Caleb, total cooperation in exchange for amnesty." I stared at her, horrified. "You turned on me." "I didn't have to turn on you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "The documents did that. Madeline gave me a choice. I could face a civil suit for the recovery of the $140,000 in salary I didn't earn, plus the cost of the gifts, plus potential criminal charges for conspiracy to commit fraud, or," she swallowed hard, "or I could liquidate everything. The car, the jewelry, the lease. I hand it all over to the company restitution fund, and I work off the remainder of the debt at minimum wage. Right here." "And you took it?" I asked. "You're going to sit here and file papers?" "I didn't want to go to jail. Caleb," she hissed, a flash of the old fire sparking and dying instantly. "I have a little sister in college. I can't have a felony on my record. Madeline promised that if I stay for 12 months, keep my head down, and help reconstruct the payroll fraud, she won't press charges. She'll sign a release." I slumped back in my chair. It was diabolical. Madeline hadn't just fired her. She had enslaved her. She had turned my mistress into an indentured servant. "Why put you here?" I asked, gesturing to the cramped space between our desks. "There are 400 desks in this building. Why right next to me?" Talia opened a file folder, her hands shaking. She stared at the paper, refusing to meet my gaze again. "I asked her that," Talia whispered, I begged her to put me on a different floor. Do you know what she said? What? She said she didn't want you to be lonely. Talia paused, and then delivered the knife. And she said she wanted you to have a mirror. She wanted us both to sit in what we did, every single day. I looked at Talia. I looked at the cheap cardigan, the nervous tick in her jaw, the way she hunched over the keyboard like a beaten dog. And then I looked at my own reflection in the dark computer monitor, the unkempt hair, the shirt that was starting to fray at the collar because I couldn't afford dry cleaning anymore. She was right. It was a mirror. For the next 4 hours, we sat in a silence that was heavier than any scream. It was a pressure cooker of humiliation. Every time she typed a key, I flinched. Every time I sighed, she stiffened. There was no romance left. There was no tragic, star-crossed lovers vibe. There was just the grinding, ugly reality of two people who had used each other and gotten caught. I watched her from the corner of my eye as she ate a stale sandwich from a vending machine for lunch. I realized, with a jolt of nausea, that I didn't love her. I don't think I had ever loved her. I loved the way she looked at me when I was holding a credit card. I loved the reflection of myself I saw in her eyes, the powerful, generous executive. Now, that reflection was gone. All that was left was a scared woman who resented me for dragging her into this mess. She wasn't a prize anymore. She was evidence, and I knew she felt the same way. When she looked at me, she didn't see a king. She saw the man who had promised her the world and delivered a cubicle in the basement. While we rotted in the dark, the world above us was catching fire. The break room television, which I could see through the glass partition, was tuned to a financial news network. At 2 o'clock, the Chiron turned bright green. Apex Meridian stock surges, 10% on restructuring news. I got up and walked to the glass, drawn like a moth to the light. On the screen was Madeline. She was standing at a podium, flanked by the CEO of Titan Global, our biggest, most difficult client, a client I had spent 3 years trying to charm, trying to bribe with dinners and golf trips, always terrified they would walk. Madeline looked impeccable. She wasn't charming him. She wasn't laughing at his jokes. She was pointing to a chart, explaining something with calm, absolute authority. The Titan CEO was nodding. He looked impressed. He looked reassured. The ticker at the bottom of the screen read, Titan Global renews 5-year contract with Apex Meridian. Citigroup upgrades. Stock to strong buy. I felt a hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with the loss of money. It was the loss of the lie. I had told myself for years that I was the glue holding the company together. I told myself that without my charm, my sales tactics, my creative accounting, the place would fall apart. Madeline was just the wife at home. She didn't understand business, but there she was. She hadn't just saved the company, she had improved it. She had cut out the cancer, me, Reed, the corruption, and the patient was healthier than ever. She didn't need my lies. She didn't need my king energy. She just needed competence. I went back to my desk. Talia was typing furiously, entering data from a spreadsheet I recognized. It was the log of the dinners we had expensed to the company. They renewed Titan, I said softly. Talia didn't stop typing. I know, she said. I saw the email blast. Everyone gets a bonus this quarter. She paused, her finger hovering over the enter key. Everyone except us. She hit the key. The sound was like a gavel coming down. I picked up my pen and went back to work. I had to reconstruct the audit trail for the diamond bracelet. I had to write down, in my own handwriting, that I had purchased it for a client named Talia Monroe. I wrote the words. I looked at the woman sitting 2 feet away, and for the first time in my life, I felt the full, crushing weight of exactly who I was. Madeline hadn't destroyed me. She had just turned on the lights. Desperation is a powerful hallucinogen. After 3 weeks of rotting in the basement, filing papers that detailed my own destruction, I convinced myself that I was not a criminal. I was a victim. Madeline wasn't a righteous CEO cleaning up corruption. She was a scorned wife using a corporate acquisition to settle a domestic score. That was the narrative. That was my life raft. I cashed out my 401k, the only asset she hadn't frozen yet, and hired a man named Marcus Vane. He wasn't a white-shoe corporate litigator. Those firms wouldn't touch me. Vane was a bulldog who advertised on the back of bus benches, a specialist in high-conflict divorce and aggressive defense. I met him in a diner 3 blocks from the office, sliding an envelope containing $5,000 in cash across the sticky table. "It is marital retaliation," I told him, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. "She bought the company solely to fire me and humiliate me. That is abuse of fiduciary duty. If we can prove she planned this takeover as a personal vendetta, we can sue for wrongful termination, defamation, and hostile work environment. We can force a settlement. We can make her pay to make us go away." Vane listened, chewing on a toothpick. "We need proof. Caleb, we need to show she baited the trap. Did she authorize the transfers you made? Did she give you the passwords?" "She left them out," I lied. "She knew I had access. She let me do it. That is entrapment." Vane nodded slowly. "I will draft a press release. We will threaten to go public with the vindictive heiress angle. Investors hate messy divorces. It drives stock prices down. She will settle." We launched the attack on a Tuesday. Vane sent a letter to the board, CCing 3 major industry blogs, alleging that the new CEO was using company resources to conduct a personal harassment campaign against her estranged husband. I waited for the explosion. I waited for Madeline to storm down to the basement, screaming, terrified of the bad press. Instead, silence. 2 hours later, a notification popped up on my company email. It was a company-wide memo from the office of the CEO. There was no emotional rebuttal. There was no mention of our marriage. It was a single PDF attachment titled, "Governance Update, Compliance Standards for Executive Conduct." In the document, without naming me, she released the timestamps of the fraudulent wire transfers I had authorized. She included the IP addresses. She included the text messages I had sent to Reed Halston, joking about hiding the bodies. She didn't fight my story. She simply suffocated it with data. The industry blogs didn't run my victim story. They ran stories about her transparency. The stock didn't drop. It went up another 2%. She had anticipated my move and used it to demonstrate her own integrity. I was furious. I sat in my cubicle, staring at the gray fabric wall, realizing that legal threats wouldn't work. I needed hard evidence. I needed to prove she was dirty. Then I remembered the Griffin Joint Capital portal. It was an old shared financial dashboard we had used years ago, before the trust was fully segmented. I hadn't logged in since 2022, but I remembered the password. If I could get in, I could find the transfer logs. I could edit the metadata. I could make it look like she had approved the Silvercrest payments herself. It was risky, but I was drowning. I waited until 7 in the evening. The basement was empty. Even Talia had left for the day to catch her bus. I opened an incognito browser window. I typed in the URL. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I entered my old username. I typed the password, Maddie and Caleb Forever, 2018. The screen loaded, access granted. I almost laughed out loud. She had forgotten to revoke my access to the old legacy system. I was in. I navigated to the Transfer History tab. There they were, the movements of funds. I reached for my mouse, preparing to download the CSV files so I could alter them. I didn't notice the slight delay in the page load. I didn't notice that the URL had redirected to a subdomain monitored by the security team. I clicked Download. A pop-up window appeared. It didn't contain the file. It contained a single line of text. User activity logged. Incident report. 9902. Created. The screen went black. I froze. It wasn't an oversight. It was a honeypot. She had left the door unlocked on purpose. Knowing I would try to break in, she knew I would try to fabricate evidence. And now, She had a time-stamped record of me accessing a restricted financial system I had no business being in. I hadn't found proof. I had just handed her a felony computer intrusion charge. I sat there in the dark, the hum of the computer tower sounding like a death rattle. She wasn't coming to yell at me. She was just adding the page to the file. Clink, another lock snapping shut. The next morning, I was a wreck. I hadn't slept. I walked into the basement office, my eyes bloodshot. Talia was already at her desk, organizing a stack of receipts. I leaned over the partition, my voice a frantic whisper. "Talia, we have to pivot. The lawyer thing didn't work. I tried to access the old portal to get the logs, but she had it trapped." Talia stopped typing. She turned to me slowly. "You tried to access the portal? Why?" "To prove she set us up," I hissed. "To show she authorized the money. If I can just get the files, I can—" "You can what?" Talia interrupted, her voice dangerously quiet. "You can forge her signature? You can fake the approval?" "I can fix the narrative," I argued. "We are in this together, Talia. If I go down, you go down. We need to testify that she told us to do it, that she was the mastermind. It is our only way out." Talia stared at me, for weeks. She had been quiet, beaten, submissive, but in that moment, something in her face fractured. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp disgust. "There is no us. Caleb," she said. She stood up, pushing her chair back. "What are you doing?" I asked. "I am done," she said. "I am done lying for you. I am done pretending that I was an innocent victim or that she is the villain. We stole the money. You stole the money. And I helped you spend it. Keep your voice down," I hissed, looking around. "No," she said, louder this time. "I'm not going to perjure myself to save your ego. You just told me you tried to hack her system to plant false evidence. Do you know what that makes you? It makes you delusional." She grabbed her purse. "I have a meeting with the legal team at 10 o'clock to review my plea agreement. I was going to try to protect you on some of the details. I was going to say I pressured you for the gifts." She looked at me with pity. "Pity is so much worse than hate. But I'm not going to do that anymore," she said. "I am going to tell them everything. I am going to tell them you tried to recruit me to frame her. I am going to testify, Caleb, against you." "Talia, wait," I pleaded. Reaching for her arm, she stepped back, out of my reach. "Don't touch me. You are sinking, Caleb, and I'm not going to drown just because you refuse to learn how to swim." She walked away. She walked out of the basement, toward the elevators that led to the light. I stood alone in the aisle. The silence of the room was absolute. My lawyer was useless. My evidence was a trap. My mistress was a witness for the prosecution. The last illusion, the idea that I was a charismatic leader who could charm his way out of anything, had collapsed. I was just a man in a cheap suit standing in a basement, waiting for the ceiling to fall. The phone on my desk rang. It was a sharp, jarring sound. I stared at it. I knew who it was. I picked up the receiver. "Mr. Ward," the assistant said. Her voice was polite, efficient, and final. "Ms. Griffin has an opening in her schedule. She would like to see you immediately." "Is this about the portal?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Please proceed to the executive elevator bank." The assistant said, "Elevator number 1 has been held for you." I hung up. I straightened my tie, though I didn't know why I bothered. I walked to the elevator bank. The doors to car number 1 were open, waiting. It was the same elevator I had ridden up in 4 weeks ago. Feeling like a king, I stepped inside. The doors slid shut, sealing me in. There was no music, just the sensation of rising, floor by floor, toward a reckoning I could no longer outrun. The elevator was a silver cage, and I was the animal being hoisted up for inspection. I stood in the corner of the car, clutching the 3 thick manila folders against my chest like a shield. These were the clean sweep files, the final, comprehensive audit of every dollar I had stolen, every wire transfer I had falsified, and every signature I had forged. I had spent the last 48 hours compiling them, fueled by caffeine and a terror so profound it made my hands shake rhythmically, a tremor I could not stop, no matter how hard I gripped the paper. I pressed the button for the executive floor. The doors slid shut, sealing out the hum of the lobby. The car began to rise. I stared at the reflection in the polished steel doors. The man looking back at me was a stranger. His suit was wrinkled. His eyes were hollowed out, dark pits in a gray face. I looked like a man who had not slept since the administration change. In a way, I hadn't. The elevator climbed smoothly. Floor 10. Floor 15. I was rehearsing what I would say. Maybe I could beg. Maybe I could offer to leave the country. Maybe if I showed her the completed files, proved that I had done exactly what she asked, she would let me walk away. Talia was gone. My lawyer was useless. Madeline was the only person left to appeal to. Suddenly, the elevator slowed. It wasn't the executive floor. It was floor 20, the marketing level. The doors opened. I expected a group of interns or a delivery cart. Instead, Madeline stepped inside. She was alone. She was wearing a cream-colored suit that looked like it cost more than my first car, tailored to a devastating precision. She didn't look tired. She looked luminous. As the doors closed behind her, the small space was instantly filled with her scent, a subtle mix of cedar and something smoky, like a fire that had burned down to expensive embers. She didn't look at me. She pressed the button for the penthouse floor, even though it was already lit. She stood facing the doors, her posture perfect, her stillness absolute. The silence in the car was unbearable. It felt pressurized, physically painful. I looked at the back of her head, at the sharp line of her bob, and something inside me finally snapped. The shame, the fear, the weeks of working in the basement, the humiliation of Talia leaving, it all boiled over into a hot, blinding resentment. "You are enjoying this," I said. My voice sounded jagged, scraping against the quiet. Madeline didn't turn. She watched the floor numbers climb. "I am not enjoying anything. Caleb, I am working." "No," I spat, stepping closer to her. "This isn't work. This is theater. You put me in the basement. You made me carry these files. You set the trap on the portal. You are dragging this out because you want to watch me bleed. You want to punish me because I chose her." I laughed, a harsh, wet sound. "That is what this is really about, isn't it? It is not about the money. It is about jealousy. You can't stand that I wanted someone younger, someone who looked at me with actual desire instead of just analyzing me." Madeline turned then. She didn't spin around in a rage. She turned slowly, pivoting on one heel, until she was facing me. Her expression was not angry, it was disappointed, like a teacher looking at a student who had failed the same simple test for the third time. "You still think this is about the affair," she said. Her voice was soft, but it hit me with the force of a physical blow. "That is your limitation. Caleb, you think the world revolves around your libido. Don't act like you don't care," I sneered, trying to find a chink in her armor. "I was your husband. I humiliated you." "You bored me," she corrected. The words stopped me cold. "The affair was a cliché," she continued, her eyes locking onto mine. "Midlife crisis, red sports car, young assistant. It was pedestrian. Caleb, I could have forgiven a lapse in judgment. People are human. Marriages are hard." She took a step toward me, and for the first time, I saw the fire. It wasn't the fire of a scorned woman. It was the cold blue flame of a titan who had been insulted by a subordinate. "But you didn't just cheat on me," she said. "You stole from me. You looked at my family's legacy, money that my grandfather worked 50 years to build, money that sends children to college, and you saw a credit card. You saw a way to buy applause." She gestured to the folders in my arms. "You treated my intelligence like a decoration," she said. "You thought I was too stupid to read a ledger. You thought I was just the philanthropic wife with her cute little hobby. That was the insult. Caleb, the arrogance. You thought you were the shark in the tank, but you never realized you were just swimming in my aquarium. I felt the blood drain from my face. She wasn't hurt. She was offended. I hadn't broken her heart. I had insulted her competence. I started to cycle through the only tools I had left, the manipulations that had worked for 10 years. I can pay it back, I pleaded. My voice dropping to a whisper, I held out the folders. Look, it is all here. I tracked every penny. I can work it off. I will sign over the pension. Just don't ruin me. Maddie, we were a team once. Remember the trip to Cabo? Remember the early days? She watched me beg with zero empathy. When the pity didn't work, I switched to threats. I straightened up, my jaw clenching. You know, if you destroy me, it will look bad for you too, I warned. The scandal, the press. I know things about the company. Madeline, I know where the skeletons are. If I go down, I will make sure the brand takes a hit. I will tell everyone you were negligent, that you let it happen. She didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just watched me flail. And then there is the anger, I shouted, losing control completely, slamming my hand against the metal wall of the elevator. You are cold. You are a monster. You lured me into this trap. You set me up just to knock me down. Who does that? What kind of wife destroys her husband for a few accounting errors? I was panting, my chest heaving, the rage vibrating in my fingertips. I wanted her to scream back. I wanted her to cry. I wanted any human reaction that would prove I still mattered to her. Madeline adjusted the cuff of her cream jacket. She looked at the display. We were at floor 40. I corrected my mistake, she said calmly. I married a man I thought was a partner. I was wrong. Now, I am correcting your mistake. What mistake? I breathed. You thought you could get away with it. The elevator chimed. Floor 42, the executive suite. The doors slid open. I expected to see the familiar reception desk. I expected to see the busy hum of the office. Instead, the lobby was empty, except for 3 people standing directly in front of the elevator. One was the company's general counsel, looking grave. The other 2 were men in dark suits with federal badges clipped to their belts. They were not smiling. One of them was holding a pair of handcuffs. I froze. I looked at the men. Then I looked back at Madeline. She stepped out of the elevator, moving past me without a backward glance. She walked toward her office, her heels clicking on the marble floor with that same steady, terrifying rhythm. Your project is complete, Mr. Ward, she said over her shoulder. I stumbled out of the elevator, my legs feeling like rubber. The folders slipped from my hands, spilling the papers, the evidence I had meticulously organized, across the floor at the feet of the federal agents. Madeline, I called out, my voice cracking. Madeline, wait, you can't do this. You ruined my life. She stopped. She didn't turn around. She stood there, framed by the light of the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city of Denver spread out beneath her like a kingdom she had just reconquered. I didn't ruin you. Caleb, she said softly, her voice carrying clearly across the silent lobby. She turned her head just enough for me to see her profile, sharp and final. I just stopped covering for you. She walked into her office and closed the door. The agent on the right stepped forward. Madeline Griffin, he said, reaching for my wrist. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Please turn around and place your hands behind your back. As the cold metal clicked around my wrists, I looked at the closed door of the CEO's office. The nameplate on the door had been changed. It no longer said acting director. It read, Madeline Griffin, owner. The federal agents did not drag me out of the building. There was no struggle, no shouting, and no scene for the evening news. It was quiet. They cuffed my hands behind my back, guided me into a black sedan waiting at the service entrance, and drove me to the Federal Processing Center. The silence in the car was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the police radio. I sat there, staring at the back of the driver's head. realizing that the clean sweep files I had spent weeks organizing were now sitting in an evidence locker, tagged with my name. The legal process that followed was agonizingly efficient. My lawyer, Marcus Vane, tried to paint the picture of a scorned woman on a rampage. In the preliminary hearings, he paced the courtroom, waving his arms, talking about marital vendettas and entrapment. He tried to argue that Madeline had allowed me to access the funds, that she had implicitly condoned the lifestyle to keep me happy, and that the prosecution was nothing more than a divorce proceeding masquerading as a criminal trial. But the United States Attorney did not care about my marriage. He did not care about Madeline's feelings. He cared about the documents. The trial was not a thriller. It was a math class, day after day. The prosecution projected the spreadsheets I had built in the basement onto the courtroom screens. They didn't need witnesses to scream at me. They just needed the dates, the times, and the IP addresses. On October 4th, the prosecutor said, pointing to a line item I knew by heart, the defendant authorized a transfer of $12,000 to Silvercrest Consortium. The metadata shows this authorization was signed using his unique digital key at 11:42 at night. At that exact time, the defendant was geolocated at a resort in Cabo San Lucas, billed to the company card. They showed the invoices for the diamond bracelet. They showed the lease agreement for Talia's apartment. They showed the payroll records where I had approved a raise for a woman who had never logged a single hour of work. It was boring. It was undeniable. And it was devastating. Then came the testimony. I watched Talia walk to the stand. She didn't wear the red dress. She wore a simple black suit, conservative and dull. She didn't look at me, not once, when the prosecutor asked her to identify the man who had directed the funds. She simply pointed a finger in my direction, her eyes fixed on the wall behind me. She told the truth. She admitted that she enjoyed the gifts, that she liked the lifestyle, but she was firm on one point. I was the architect. I was the one who said it was safe. I was the one who told her it was a standard executive compensation package. He told me he was the company, Talia said, her voice quiet but clear in the packed courtroom. He told me everyone did it. He told me his wife didn't understand business. She stepped down from the stand and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back. I learned later that she had moved back to Ohio, taken a job as a paralegal, and disappeared into a quiet, anonymous life. There was no glamorous comeback for her. She was just a woman walking away from a mistake she had finally found the courage to name. When the verdict came, the jury didn't deliberate for days. They were back in 4 hours. Guilty on all counts: wire fraud, embezzlement, money laundering. The sentencing hearing was the final nail. I stood before the judge, a stern woman with glasses who looked vaguely like the mother I had disappointed years ago. I expected a lecture about greed. I expected her to yell. Instead, she leaned forward and took off her glasses. "Mr. Ward," she said, her voice echoing in the silence. "You are not a victim of circumstance. You were not desperate. You were not hungry. You had privilege. You had a high-paying career. You had a family. You had opportunity. You looked at all of that, and you chose fraud. You chose ego." She sentenced me to 8 years in a minimum security federal facility, plus full restitution. Madeline was not there to hear it throughout the entire trial. My wife never appeared. She never gave an interview. She never sat in the gallery to gloat. She was completely absent from the spectacle. She was present only in the results. From the library of the correctional facility, I watched the world move on without me. I read the financial papers. I saw the headlines. Apex Meridian rebrands as MG Atlas. The article described a sharper, leaner company with a new ticker symbol and a transparent governance model that was attracting record investment. The old era, my era, was described as a period of administrative bloat. The corrupt executives I had worked with were facing civil lawsuits. Their careers turned to ash. And Madeline? There was a profile on her in a business magazine 6 months into my sentence. The photo showed her standing in the lobby of the building, the same lobby where I was arrested. She looked different. Her hair was softer. She wasn't wearing the armor of the severe Navy suit anymore. She looked like someone who could finally breathe. The reporter asked her about the scandal. They asked her if she felt vindicated by my conviction. They asked if she felt like she had won the war. I read her quote 3 times. Sitting there in my prison gray. "I didn't win anything," she told the reporter. "Winning implies it was a game. It wasn't a game. It was a cleanup." The article described her going home to her estate in Aspen on the weekends. It mentioned our children, who were safe, loved, and shielded from the press, never used as props in her narrative. I closed my eyes and I could see it. I could see the scene I would never be part of again. I imagined her walking into that big, quiet house. I imagined her taking off the CEO blazer and changing into a soft, oversized sweater. I imagined her pouring a glass of wine and looking out at the mountains. The silence of the house no longer heavy with my lies, but light with her own truth. She wouldn't be thinking about me. She wouldn't be thinking about Talia. She would take a deep breath, the kind of breath you take when a fever finally breaks. She would look at the clean rooms, the clean books, and the clean future, and she would say the only thing that mattered. It is clean now, and for the first time in years, she would mean the house, the company, and herself. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to hear where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment down below and share your thoughts on Caleb's downfall. Did he get what he deserved? If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the channel Morgan Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help us share these stories with even more people. Your support means the world to us. See you in the next story.